Welcome back at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I have changed the vibe around here since the last time we got together with my next guest, Tim Wendel, and I think we met probably like right here, right, at Camden Yards, probably right around 1992 and USA Baseball Weekly, and so many dear friends, and Paul White, and my dear friend Rasig was scribbling cartoons back in the day, baseball every week. Tim, it's been quite a journey from the beginning, and at least we have a 2-year lease extension now at Camden Yards, so I'm feeling good about that. Always good to have you back. JHU Hopkins writer in residence, Tim Wendel. What's going on? New book, new fascinations, huh?
New one, yeah. We're going back to Cuba, Nestor. It's been kind of wild. I didn't think I'd be writing about Cuba again, but I am, and Billy Bryan lives, so my narrator is back in full force.
Well, let's talk about Cuba for a minute. If next time I get up in the middle of the segment, I'm going to bring, when Mike Flanagan left the earth, my dear friend, his widow brought me gifts one night. They had never delivered our wedding gift, believe it or not, which is a beautiful tea maker. And she gave me one of Mike's ties that was one of his favorites that I've kept. And she gave me his Cuba Orioles poster on the wall. And it's from the 99 trip, which I was on. And I was always fascinated by Cuba and Fidel and, Che and all of that. And the cigars, of course, and the rum. But I was on that trip. Dude, it's unbelievable. It's been 22 years.
That's
the
crazy.
Cars, the music, the vibe, the dominoes, the conversation, the baradero, the whole deal. Give me your fascination with Havana.
Oh, my fascination. And we were on that trip together, which was great. I've got that poster hanging up right
Were
here.
you on the 20-minute flight from Miami with Joe Morgan and John?
Yes.
We were on the same plane. Okay.
You're on the same plane.
Because they
and
left
I interviewed Joe Morgan
ice cream
beforehand.
bars on the seat. It was an American Airlines plane. The flight was literally like 11 minutes. It was like straight up and straight down. And they gave us a whole lunch to eat.
That's right.
Like, how am I going to eat all of this? So, yeah, it's all I remember. It was and we're thinking, well, we're going to Cuba. They might not have food there. So you better take it.
That's right. We better pack it in. Well, I remember coming on that return flight out. And I ended up sitting next to Stan Kasten. And we, like you say, it's about less than 15 minutes. You go up and you go down. And as we're going up, leaving, heading back to Miami, I go to Stan. I go, say the political thing gets sorted out. How difficult would it be to put a team, minor league team, maybe someday a major league team there? And, Kasten, he's always got that Cheshire cat smile a little bit. And he just kind of smiled and nodded and goes, piece of cake.
Well, I mean, Angelos, I found this picture of Brady Anderson from that game. I posted it last week. I will find it in the next couple of minutes, and I will share it with you.
Oh,
it's
I'd love
from
to see
that
it.
game,
Yep.
and Angelos is sitting next to Selig, sitting next to Fidel, and Brady Anderson's pushing through a pitch, and I'm thinking, dude, I was sitting like 30 yards right behind them,
Right.
and 22 years later, what Cuba represents, what baseball in Cuba represents, what Omar Linares and those players that never made it from that game, that never got rich, that never came to America, and yet Livan Hernandez and other guys coming on boats. I mean, the Cuba story for baseball, if you love baseball, and of course my people came from a different place in Venezuela, but if you love baseball, there's baseball and Cuba kind of go together for a guy like you, right?
Oh, very much. And yet the disconnects at time, Nestor, just blow my mind. My first trip was in 91, and we went down there to cover exhibition series between the two Olympic teams. And the U.S. Olympic team was loaded, even though they were young. Nomar Garcia-Parro, Charles Johnson, Jeffrey Hammonds, Darren Driver, goes on and on. They got killed. They got beaten the first game 16-1. I still feel for my old friend Jeffrey Hammonds, who had to play center field that night in this place out on the eastern end of the island called Olguín. And I'm walking with him down off the bus to the field, and he's like looking out at the center field fence. He goes, "Tim, what's that say out there?" And it said socialism or morte. Jeffrey, I think it means socialism or death. And I said, where are you playing tonight? And he goes, right next to that sign. He made like 2 or 3 errors. He had a tough night.
That trip was so magical to me, right? Like, I've been all over the world now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 52. And to keep that poster here, to honor Mike and to honor the trip and having done it. And now it's sort of open. You could, when I go to Southwest Airlines, like Havana's a place you can click, like.
Right. Well, that's how I went the last time, the 2017 flight, which got me thinking again of doing a sequel and doing Escape from Castro's Cuba. We flew out of BWI on a want to get away fare. And I'm going, okay. And we land down there. But this is what blew my mind. It got me thinking about a sequel. We landed on the Southwest Airlines flight. We're walking across the tarmac. We haven't cleared customs yet. And this guy saddles in next to me and dungarees, t-shirt, but I pretty much figure out he's plain clothesman. And he goes, call me Ricky. And I go, okay, Ricky. And now I don't tell him my name. And we're still walking across. I've got my wife with me too. First trip to Cuba for her, my 4th. And then Ricky goes, what brings you back to Cuba again, Senior Wendell? And I'm going, oh my gosh, I haven't cleared customs and they know I'm here. But I love the city. I love the people. I have so much fun there. It's just the nights go on and on, as you well know.
Well, the story for me, not just that Joe Morgan sat in front of me, I sort of remember everything about that trip. Mm-hmm. And the first night we went to a World Series game there. When we landed. So seeing 2 Cuban teams, we went to the stadium that night. We ate peanuts, drank beer, hung out. We were with the prensa, but we mingled, which was a little shocking on our first day in Cuba, that it was like what my father had told me about it, what the American government. But the part of the drums and the whistles and the revelry around the baseball game, Americans would never understand it. I've never been to a game in Japan or in Korea, even though I've been to baseball stadiums there, seeing U2 a couple of years ago, in eating noodles out of a box with chopsticks and sort of the cultural things that you would have there. But I remember the noise of the baseball game, how incredibly jubilant it was. And the other thing about that trip, and you mentioned flying home with Stan Kasten, I remember being stuck in that airplane hangar before we left with Bonnie Raitt, Mick Fleetwood, Jimmy Buffett, Dave Koz. I mean, I go down the list. It was literally like a who's who. Gladys Knight. I mean, it was crazy who was in that airplane hangar.
Sure. They're all coming back from that Bridges concert they had done, Peter Frampton and all that. But, my very first trip, 91, again, we're out in Old Gein. Poor Jeffrey Hammonds and the guys are getting beat up. And in the middle of that game, they didn't have a press box for us, which was fine. We're sitting out in the crowd. And I'm with, who was on that trip? Bill Brubaker from the Post. Dan Le Batard was along. I'm sitting on the end.
At least you had an interpreter if you had Le Batard.
Yeah, Le Batard, even though a little bit of a rabble-rouser.
I don't know if he speaks Spanish, but I know he speaks Cuban.
He definitely speaks Cuban. And this older guy came up in the middle of the game, and I'm on the end. And he sits down next to me. He kind of squats down in the aisle. And now the Minnesota Twins had won the World Championship, and I'd covered that. And this guy had figured out we were all American journalists or something. And he asked me, and then the other guys are helping me. He says, tell me about the Minnesota Twins. And I start my whole sports talk radio thing. It's going to be difficult for them.
Well, did you hand him the book or did you not?
No, the book wasn't done.
Oh, okay.
No, I had done
I
that
can
book.
point out that you did write a little book about that.
A little book. That was a little bit later. But I'm answering kind of, they're going to lose some players, don't have deep pockets, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he goes, I know all that. And I go, what do you need to know? And he goes, what do they look like? And I went around the diamond with Le Batard and some other people's help, describing Ken Herbeck at first base, Chuck Knobloch at second, put Jack Morris on the mound. And my last guy was describing Kirby Puckett, who's difficult enough to describe in English, let alone my broken Spanish, bowling ball of a guy. And as I'm doing so, I'm looking out toward the field, just trying to, get some mental images. And finally, I'm done. I've butchered this whole thing, but I'm done. And I turn back to my old guy, and he stands up. He's got tears starting to run down his face. And he pats me on the back and says, "Thank you. Now I know." And my friends tease me that Hemingway had the old man in the sea. I've got the old man in the ballpark. So,
Well, we both had the Bodeguita del Medio, right? And
yes.
Ernie's name up on the roof. Tim Wendel is here, author. When he leaves the job of writer in residence, I hope to be the next one at Johns Hopkins. He's written a new book honoring all things Cuban. Tell everybody about your books, and because you write all kinds of books. I mean, last time I had you on, we talked about cancer and your brother, and I just told my wife I was having you on with Cancer Crossings, but you've written true stories and fictional stories and really true stories and close to the heart stories, but this one spoke to you again. The island sang to you, just like Hemingway, Wendell.
Yeah, very much. And my characters spoke to me again, which was funny because those of you that have read Castro's Curveball, that it's a first-person narrator, washed up ball player, catcher, somewhat based on Rick Dempsey a little bit. And
or Jake, what's it? The major league catcher was Jake.
Yeah, Jake, and I love always Crash Davis and Bull Durham too. So kind of a combination of all those. But his name's Billy Bryan, and I hadn't spoken to Billy Bryan. When I do fiction, I speak to my characters. I interview them, and a great way to be left alone. Everybody thinks in the house you're going crazy. I hadn't spoken to Billy in a while, and it was great to start up that friendship again. And Billy gets in a whole bunch of crazy problems in Escape from Castro's Cuba, but they eventually work out.
Well, I think everything with Cuba would be about how you said it and where you said it and where along the Cuban timeline and the continuum, because I'm not even really sure, right? Like we were going to go to Cuba when it opened up. It opened up and my wife was on her deathbed, literally, right? Mm-hmm. So Obama opened it up. My wife comes through this arc and this curve and then gets better. We literally had a flight. My wife's never been to Cuba. We had a flight right when it opened up, and we even, like, I had emails back and forth with, people there that were going to show us around and do stuff. And then we canceled the flight because she had gotten sick again. And I have literally in the last 5 years, and maybe part of this was Trump, right? Like, by the way, our flight down there was the week that Trump was being inaugurated.
Oh, you were going to come just a little bit after
us. We
us.
Literally decided not to go because we weren't going to be in Cuba during an inauguration. You know what I mean? Like, right. Literally, that's why we didn't go, because of Trump. Like, but she had just gotten better and we did something else, but I haven't been back, right? So I've only been once. I've had friends that have gone. I want to ask you, you were there in 2017, your wife, what did you find? Because we almost went right around that time.
You know what I found, Nestor, was the scenery we saw, like the Hotel Nacional, the big wide boulevards, all that. Old Town is kind of corking along. Got some.
By the way, were you there when the Stones played and the baseball trip? Was that why you went?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So Pedro was with you on that trip.
Yeah. Well, we were a little bit after that, just a smidge, but it was great.
Okay.
But what has changed baseball-wise, what blew my mind, and I didn't realize it till we got down there, is, as you pointed out, the days are gone, say, when El Duque Hernandez got out on a raft and, floated across the Florida Straits or something like that. What's happening now is they're getting out, but they're being spirited off on cigarette boats by crime syndicates, usually from Mexico. So the ball players have traded one dangerous situation. Yeah, let's try to get out on a raft or try to escape when our team's in Mexico, like Livan Hernandez did, for another dangerous situation, which is which guys are we going to cozy up to try to get us off the island, and how much of say new contract or signing bonus or something I'm going to be beholden to these guys for. I mean, Yasiel Puig's probably the biggest cautionary tale, where I believe he's given now 25% of his signing bonus and even his contract to the crime syndicate guys that got him off the island. And so it's still a very, very difficult choice. And it's not the slam dunk I don't think Americans think it is. Oh, of course, they're going to sign with the major leagues and make all this money. Well, first of all, they're leaving their family behind. And number two, these days, they're having to cozy up with some really tough cats.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the Joe Cubas days. And, Tim, speak to that. I mean, you're an old school baseball writer during all of this in the 90s. You talk about Livan Hernandez. Maybe some people really aren't familiar with those stories, and not just for baseball players, but for people. They're just people that want to leave Cuba and be free. These are the things we talked about. Our mutual friend, Dan Lebitard, that's been talking about this in South Florida, and my Venezuelan background, talking to Cuban people in South Florida and people that elect vermin like Marco Rubio. Like the ideology of Cuba and the politics of Cuba, and how some things have changed, but some things haven't changed at all. But the baseball part of this in the 90s, as a baseball writer, when Joe Cubas calls and says, I got a guy in El Salvador right now, we fared it. That was going on. It was always sort of mafia to some degree, right?
Oh, it's very much. A lot of it under the table. And I think in some ways that aspect's even ramped up even more. It's like get them to a third world country, showcase them, then sell them off to the highest bidder. There's a great documentary out right now, if folks are into it, called The Last Out, about 3 Cuban ball players who defect. They get out of the country. They end up in Costa Rica. They're repped by a guy, an agent out of LA, and who could have signed them to some good, relatively good contracts with some major league teams, but he keeps holding out for the best deal. And finally, they end up with no deal. None of these guys get signed by the U.S. teams. They just go, oh, forget it. And the agent just messed it all up. And the one guy, and I love his name, it's Happy Ordonez, I believe, but the first name Happy, he gets so fed up. He's in Costa Rica. This agent won't sign him. He's been jumping through hoops for this agent, that he ends up traveling all the way up through Central America and crosses the border in the U.S. He now works at a Fitness Express or 24-hour fitness in Houston. And yet this is a draw. They want to get to our country, be free, be able to decide things the way they want to. And I think it's there's more of a ramification with the ball players, because they have guys like you and me coming down. I still remember telling Omar Linares at one point, yeah, you could make a 40-man roster, but I don't know if you'd start. Boy, that was stupid. You'd start any baseball team in the U.S. But what they
Linares would have been like Mike Schmidt, right?
Yes,
like
he'd been Mike Schmidt, would have been Brooks Robinson, maybe with more power. And they want the chance to compete against the best. I mean, we're talking about that home and away series in '99. For the Orioles, that was having to play on their off day.
What was one of the biggest disgraces to ever hit this place, right? Like, yeah. If I was there that night and they half-assed it, I was in the locker room when Scott Erickson wrote put a list up of who doesn't want to go on the trip. Palmeiro, who, the highest character guy, Rafael Palmeiro, he spoke out. Like, all of this stuff was going on. Dude, I was at the stadium in Fort Lauderdale, that dump that they've turned into a soccer facility next to the airport, right off of Cypress Creek. And, picketers were showing up. I mean, there was a tough thing in '99 with baseball. I don't know what it really served. I've looked back at that picture, and I will find the picture in a minute because I did post it, of Brady Anderson. And, there's Fidel, murderer, Peter Angelos, whatever you want to call him, Bud Selig, whatever you want to call him. And 21 years later, I got the poster over here, and it's a great trip. And I had a hell of a night at the Bodeguita singing songs with Andy Summers, with one of the greatest stories I've ever told, the greatest story of my life, like singing 3 Police songs with Andy Summers in the Bodeguita del Medio with a guitar, and Woody Harrelson doing lyrics with me. It was a crazy trip, but I don't know what good it did baseball. I think Angelos thought he was going to get 3 Hyatts down on the Veradero. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was the get. The get was everything you talked about. There's a reason you asked Stan Kasten that question. And here we are 22 years later. I don't know what's changed.
And I think what drove a lot of the Cuban ball players crazy is here it was out there in front of them yet again. I can still remember, I talked to Linares, Andy Gonzalez, who hit that homer in Camden, on the return game where they win 12-6. And they just said, this is, to be able to play in a ballpark like this, meaning Camden, this is our dream. And to be able to play against and win against major leaguers, we finally got a chance.
How about the security around those cats that night about,
crazy.
wanting to sneak out of the Sheraton and around the corner into Joe Cubas's van behind the Hyatt and drive him down to D.C. and, declare sovereignty. I mean, they're just sort of all sorts of things that could have happened, right?
Oh, very much. I mean, all the agents outside that hotel that night, I'm still driving by it at 2 a.m. and I'm going, oh, there's Cubas. There's the usual suspect, so to speak.
Man, I could pull the pictures up from the old days, but I took this picture, so I'm not in this one. But I have a couple that I'm in. These are some crazy times, dude. You know, there's Woody Harrelson and Andy Summers in the Bodegita. And there's me and Scotty P landing at the and I'm wearing an Albert. That's not a Cal Ripken jersey. That's an Albert Bell jersey. You know.
But you know about the crowd was very much. The crowd in Cuba didn't know what to make of Albert Bell because, first of all, he's pummeling all the balls out of the ballpark in batting practice, which isn't really done that much. And then his number, I believe, was 88, right? Double ocho.
88, correct.
And in Santeria, ooh, that's kind of some weird mojo, as I was.
Oh, right. So they saw him as a little bit demonic.
Powerful, mysterious, dark side stuff. And so when Bell was up to bat in batting practice, that's all you heard, at least in my part of the crowd, because I was down in the Cuban section. Everybody's going, double ocho, double ocho. So.
Hey, man, this is Andy Summers and I, and you can see people staring in from out on the street. You know, out here doing Hotel California and Eagle songs and police songs. It was a hell of a night in Havana and a hell of a new book as well. Tim Wendel joining us here. He's escaping from Castro's Cuba all over again. A fictional story, but some of your books are not, correct?
Correct.
Set the scene for your now. If you do a third one, it'll be a trilogy, right? But you have a nice little duo.
Yeah, well, this duo, I mean, the first one's, roughly when Winter Ball League in Cuba was bigger than big. I mean, Tommy Lasorda, Brooks Robinson, Willie Mays played a season down there, etc. And you had guys like Tiant and Oliva trying to get off the island and play up in the major leagues. And so what we've done now is advance it quite a few years. And Billy Bryan's gone back, and suddenly a star prospect catches his eye, and can he get him off the island? That's the backdrop for Escape from Castro's Cuba. And Billy's, he's an older guy, but he's still got some oomph to him. So it's funny because I started the book, and Daniel Silva's a good friend, and Silva's got that ongoing character of Gabriel Alon. And I was talking with Daniel going, I don't know. I got this guy, I'm looking to bring him out of mothballs. He's a little long in the tooth. And Daniel just goes, do it. I just keep going to the mat with Gabriel Alon. And I'm going, okay. So it worked out.
Well, Tim, it's always great to visit with you, and I can't visit with you and talk a little baseball without talking a little baseball with you, right? Where are you on the baseball continuum right now? I've been telling a story this week, and I'm not proud of this, but it is what it is, right? I mean, my Orioles jersey that I bought in like 93 or 94 to give you the era of the jersey that I've worn proudly because it still fits, thanks to my yoga, my Planet Fitness subscription, that I packed it with my skipjacks and some other stuff that's been in my closet. And I'm just sort of like, I'm not going to wear it. I'm just going to put it away. And I don't know if I'm going to go to a game this year or not. If I do, I might go to one. I'm not going to be a repeat customer. I don't know what the Orioles are doing, right? I mean, the games aren't on TV here. I mean, they're really a disgrace. I mean, Chris Davis running around, no long-term lease. The owner, flies in on the flagship and does a little lip service and goes back to Nashville with his boots on. No one's seen Peter. There's no status report. They're horrible. There's no marketing. I don't know what to say, but until they want me to come back, I'm probably going to stay away for a while. I got other things to do. I'm going to go hiking this summer. I'm going to go eat crab cakes all over the state. I'm going to go do some things this summer that don't include this anymore. And it's not shame on me. It's shame on them.
I agree. And I think what you're talking about in terms of the Orioles and Baltimore, Nestor, I think goes almost nationwide. Somebody was asking me the other day, how do you feel about baseball? And I go, I always would love baseball. I love watching baseball. But I'm getting the same vibes because I was the lead labor guy for Baseball Weekly in 93, 94. I'm getting the same vibes, the distrust between the players union and the owners that I had back then. And granted, I'm not on the beat, so I'm not as tight with it and all this stuff as I was before, but
nor do you want to be anymore, right?
No, I really don't want to
I mean,
be.
you're happily out of baseball locker rooms forever, right? Like they
Yeah.
threw me out
Some of the
15
scenes
years
I've
ago,
had
and
in
now
there,
I'm
no
like,
good.
if they invited me back, it would have to come with one hell of an apology.
Yeah.
You know, after what this city's been through over the last 15 years, playing games in the middle of the Freddie Gray, just you know, kicking the Ravens out of the city after they won the Super Bowl, so that we couldn't have a proper celebration here and host a Thursday night game. Just disgraceful, horrible things that have happened here. And you know, I look at it and I wonder what's going to be 10 years from now, how they're ever going to build it back without a Brooks and a Boog and a Cal. You know,
And you
they
can say
had
that
all
for
of
a
that.
lot of teams.
I do worry about the future of the city with baseball out
Yeah.
loud. Often.
I worry about the future of baseball nationally, frankly, because if we have another labor Armageddon, even a brush with it, I think a lot more people are just going to wipe their hands of the sport. And you know, I've got, you know, my son's what now, 28. I raised him to be a baseball fan, etc. He really wants nothing to do with it anymore. And you know, he watches Chelsea soccer, he watches his Washington Caps, but baseball's not very high. And I worry that they're losing the younger fans, but I also feel that if they do a labor showdown again, and I feel both sides are kind of itching to do it, but if they do it, it's really going to be costly.
That's terrible. That like a guy named Aparicio and a guy who's written a lifetime of baseball books and been around it forever. I mean, we could sit here and talk about losing Tommy Lasorda or even Larry King, you know,
Mm-hmm.
from the days when we would see, you know, the baseball, all the Hall of Famers. Joe Morgan, I just mentioned him, you know,
Yeah,
uh,
Al
and,
Kaline,
and
Bob Gibson. I mean, the list goes on and on. Tom Seaver since
Al
last
Kaline.
spring. Yeah, yeah. It's just, and yet that's where I hear about baseball now. It's like when somebody like Al Kaline dies, I'll hear from my old Tiger fans or something, the ones who liked, you know, Summer of '68 or something. When, you know,
Well,
say
Kaline went to high school 5 blocks from where I live, literally.
yeah, and it's like these older fans going, oh, we lost Gibson, you know, we lost Morgan, we lost Kaline, we lost Seaver, we lost Necro. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's been kind of eerie in the last 6 to 8 months. Yet I don't hear from anybody else about baseball, and that's not a great sign.
Yeah, I mean, if I call you this summer or you call me and say, hey man, I got a couple of box seats. You want to go see the White Sox on Wednesday night? You know what I mean? Like
I would do it just to hang with you.
I would do it just to hang with you. And I say that to so many people, but here's the rub, Tim. We never do it. Right?
Yeah,
We talk about it and we never do it. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's going to be the first outdoor thing we can kind of sort of do. It's going to happen before the first beer at Merriweather on the lawn, which is what I really want to do. And I've talked about going to Vegas with the Ravens later this year to see the stadium and do something that feels like what used to be normal. How are you doing with the plague? I mean, how's plague life been for an author in residence? Not a bad place to be during a plague.
Not a bad place to be. It's been getting a lot of work done. It's been weird doing a lot of online classes, but we've made it work. And you know, I miss being in person with my students, but you know, right now I've got students all around the world. Right now I've got one in Dublin, one in New Delhi, another 2 in Australia. So you kind of get a different roundup to it. So
All right. So look, man, I'm going to make a date with you for here's what we're going to do: beer, crab cake, and a baseball game. And it doesn't have to be at Camden Yards, okay?
oh,
But we're going to do something. And you know, I'm doing this with a lot of different people that have been on the show that I'm like, you know, now that I'm Zooming, I feel like we're in the same room. You know what I mean? I feel like I've actually seen you and like hung out for a half an hour, unlike the radio, which was a little bit more mystical. And, you know, you couldn't see beautiful backdrops. Like, how about the love over here? I get
I
the
love
right.
that love.
I
I
took
love
this
this photo.
picture at the beginning of the plague last year
Yeah.
when, you know, this is the Marriott on the corner and that's the hospital over my shoulder. And they
Right.
were doing it for the nurses. And give me an update on Cancer Crossings and where we are with that, because I can't get you out of here without talking about some serious stuff, aside from all this baseball and political nonsense and rock and
Oh,
roll.
we just did a thing for Cancer Crossings, another Zoom thing, but we brought out a couple of the old doctors, you know, now in their 80s, who are like, you know, pretty much dreamed up chemotherapy and all these protocols we
Save
take.
millions of lives, literally, right? Millions.
Yeah, I mean, why they don't have statues for these guys, men and, you know, the nurses and the docs, I don't know. And it was just so great to see them. And people just, you know, maybe it's because we're in COVID, maybe we've been locked down in this pandemic, but they really love to hear, even though it happened more than a half century ago, about another situation where medically we got through it. You know, medically we're able to turn the tables. And that was really an interesting night, because I went into it with a little bit of trepidation, because we were, you know how it is when you're moderating and hosting some of these, you're going, well, okay, that person's going to speak to this and whatever. We had a couple of the former docs from Roswell Park up in Buffalo, but we also had Mary Pinkel, Dr. Donald Pinkel's daughter, and Donald Pinkel's one who started up St. Jude in Memphis. So we're straddling some things, but it all went really well. And pretty much the vibe, the theme was, we got through this, you know, half century ago, we can get through COVID. And it was great. It worked. It was a great night.
I had all of my baseball ticket stubs out. Still have them in a box. And when Hank Aaron died, they were sitting on my desk. And when Hank Aaron died, I thought about seeing him play. And my father, I thought about the home run, and I remember that vividly because I was 5 years old and I watched it. And my dad made me watch it. And then a year later, he's a DH with the Brewers, right, and came to Baltimore. And in '76, he came to Baltimore, and not just on the baseball card, the '76 Topps, but my dad took me out, and I remember my dad taking me to a doubleheader. Distinctly remember this, because my dad said he'll play. He'll definitely play one of the two games if we go to the doubleheader. It was a twilighter. It was on a Friday night. My dad got off of work early. We went out, I remember where we sat behind home plate in the upper deck. And those seats had splinters in them then before they metaled them, in the upper deck, the upper above 16. So I remember sitting in the upper deck, being there and having a ticket stub. And I laminated the ticket stub, a little blue ticket stub, and the date. And I pulled it out and I looked up the date. They played the Indians that night. I got the wrong ticket stub all these years later from 70. I went to a lot of games. I went to a lot of Oriole games, So I had the wrong ticket stub, but I did look up the Hank Aaron night, and he did go 1 for 3, hit a single. I remember him hitting a single. I remember the standing ovation. It wasn't like super crowded. There were 17,000 people there or whatever. But seeing Hank Aaron play was so important to my father, who had seen Babe Ruth play in New York, So, but, these baseball stories that come back, and it's, did you see Hank Aaron play? So here's what I'm going to say about our beer and our crab cake and our night that we're going to see. We need to see like Mike Trout play. Or
we need to see somebody memorable.
Somebody memorable, because all of my old stubs that I have from the 80s, once I discovered driving in about 83 in the World Series, I started going to Phillies games, 85, 6, 7, 8. And then Schilling pitched there, and Schilling was married to my best friend growing up. And I got free tickets, which were the little stubs, and we sat out in left field, but, above the bullpen at the Vet and the Fanatic, all of that. But I went to a lot of games, Tim, 85, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's how I got my nickname from Mike Resig, Nasty Nestor, was Todd Froworth came out of the bullpen.
Is that how that happened?
But I have all of these stubs, and if I look them up, I promise you, Tim, that every stub was a night when either Hershiser pitched, Gooden pitched, Carlton pitched, Fernando pitched. I only went to the Vet when there was a pitcher. It was always about Nolan Ryan, J.R. Richard, whatever it was to see a pitcher. And my dad was the same way. Like, my dad, what night's Ryan pitching? Let's go see Tanana, And it was always a Splittorf pitching that night. I don't want to see Dennis Leonard, man. So it was always that way that would draw me to a game. So when I reach to you about a game, I'm going to be a jerk, and I'm going to say, hey, man.
Well, we got to do it. We got to.
Machado's playing at the Vet tonight. I'll wear my Padre jersey. I'll get my jersey out. We're going to go up to Philly, eat cheesesteaks, and be idiots. Okay?
All right. I'm on.
Yes! I'm going to make a baseball night with friends. That's the only thing that's going to get me there, Tim. Trust me. Love you. Appreciate you. Good luck with the new book. And I'm glad we got to share some memories,
All right. Keep rocking the house there, Nestor. You're doing great.
Not often you make me look at a picture of Albert Bell with Fidel Castro, but you made me do it.
Yeah, that's too interesting, person.
Escape from Castro's Cuba, something that Albert Bell managed to do back in '99. We all did on a plane, even with Bonnie Raitt, who was looking a little hungover that morning. I must
Very
admit,
much.
but I did say hello to her. I am Nasty at WNST.net. Tim Wendel can be found anywhere great writing is sold, bartered, or brokered on the interwebs. Go find him and go find his new book and his old book and any of his old baseball books as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, having beer, eating crab cakes, and talking baseball. We are Baltimore Positive.